Hi guys, it's me, KazzaHD, and welcome to the sprint race watch along for the 2023 United States Grand Prix weekend. Hope you guys are well, and thank God this is the penultimate sprint race of the season. Most of them do tend to be bang average at best and very forgettable, and I hope that this one is a bit better than that. The grid is set up nicely for the sprint, and the pace really throughout the field, it looks quite close, and definitely a lot closer than I expected. So there is a decent chance that it could be, a good sprint race today. But given that it's only 19 laps, let's not get ahead of ourselves. But of course, the sprint getting underway in, as you can see on your screen, just under 90 minutes from now. And what we're going to do in these 90 minutes is, of course, preview, build up to the sprint race, looking at the results of qualifying for the sprint race, which took place, about 2.5 hours ago. I think the sprint qualifying finished. So we'll get into the results of that, and I'll get into the relative pace of the cars, and then we'll go team by team and go through as well your starting grid for this sprint. And then, the sprint race starts in 1 hour and 28 minutes. It will be a 19-lap sprint, and if there isn't a safety car, then it should be only, 25 minutes long, the sprint. So, let's hope we get a better than normal sprint race here at the brilliant Circuit of America's track at the US Grand Prix here in Austin, Texas. Just wanted to say, as usual, hope you guys are well, no matter what time zone you're in, what part of the world you're from. Hopefully you're all safe and well. And hopefully you'll be joining me for a sprint race today, which is one of the better ones. Of course, the next sprint race on the calendar is in 2 weeks' time in Sao Paulo. We know that one is probably going to be good because the last couple have been good at that track, but this one we're a bit unsure because normally US Grand Prix are exciting, but we've never had a sprint race at this particular track, so we'll have to find out when we get into the sprint itself. Before I go any further though, just want to say there is a poll running at the top of the live chat. Let me know for the next hour and 26 minutes, who do you think will win the sprint today? the sprint today in Texas. Your options are Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton, and Lando Norris. Out of those four, who do you think will take the win in the sprint? But let's now get into the results of sprint qualifying. So I'll just hide the timer for a few minutes. And let's get into it. So Max Verstappen just about took sprint qualifying pole, only half a tenth clear of Leclerc. Of course, in qualifying yesterday, he was very initially 5,000ths of a second quicker than Leclerc in Q3, and then had his time deleted. The track limits have been redefined after complaints, I think, from the drivers yesterday, and they've made them a bit easier for the drivers, as there were a couple corners where it was just a bit too over the top in terms of the policing, which is good to see. Max Verstappen on pole for the sprint, and then Leclerc second, Hamilton just behind in third, so close between Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes and McLaren, great to see. Lando Norris in fourth, Oscar Piastri in fifth place, and then Carlos Sainz in sixth, Sergio Perez seventh, with Russell eighth, Albon in ninth, and Pierre Gasly rounding out the top 10. I have to say, quite amazed that there is only half a second covering the top 7. Never thought this weekend it'd be that close between the top 7, but that is great to see. George Russell, by the way, who ended up in 8th, a really poor performance, and he's been quite poor this weekend in general. He has been given a 3-place grid penalty for the sprint today because he severely blocked Leclerc in, I think, sprint qualifying 1, and I saw a clip of it. I wasn't actually able to watch sprint qualifying because I was watching my team Chelsea bottle a lead against Arsenal, but I did see the clip of Leclerc blocking Russell, and yeah, it was a clear slam dunk penalty. It was one of the most obvious cases of blocking that you'll ever see. So yeah, Russell will start in 11th place, meaning it will be Albon in 8th. Very impressive performance, by the way, from Albon, given how in qualifying yesterday, Albon was 18th, I think. So yeah, very, very good performance by Alex. And then Gasly will be in P9, and in P10 will be Daniel Ricciardo, who had I wouldn't say an amazing sprint qualifying, but I think realistically it was about the best it could have been. Maybe you could argue he should have been ahead of Albon, but Albon was really, really good in that sprint quali a couple hours ago. So yeah, I don't think Ricciardo really could have done any better. And, you know, starting P10, that's not a bad position to start at all. And I think does have a decent chance of scoring at least 1 point in the sprint today. Fernando Alonso is 12th. Aston Martin still suffering from what happened in practice 1 yesterday, where they didn't get the running in they needed to really get the car set up, and that's why they were so poor in qualifying. And they were better in sprint qualifying, but not really that much better. So Alonso in 12th. Ocon 13th. He will definitely, Ocon, be very disappointed with being that low down, when of course he qualified for the Sunday race yesterday in 7th. So yeah, very disappointing for Ocon. Lance Stroll 14th. At least Stroll was only a tenth of a second away from his teammate. The reason Aston Martin is so poor this weekend has nothing to do with Lance Stroll. It's to do with the lack of reliability in the first practice session, and it's having a really severe knock-on effect. Zhou 15th. At least good for him to out-qualify teammate Bottas. And then Hulkenberg 16th, Magnussen 17th. Haas's upgrade has not worked at all. Bottas 18th, Tsunoda 19th. Tsunoda having a disastrous sprint qualifying 1. And then Logan Sargent, no surprise, at the very back of the field. Of course, he qualified last for the Sunday race yesterday. So yeah, no surprise there. And ended up... how far? I think 1.8 seconds he was slower than Albon in sprint qualifying. I know Albon, you know, progressed through to sprint qualifying 3 and would have had a much better track in terms of grip, but at the end of the day, that's Sargent's fault for not getting through with Albon to that part of qualifying. But yeah, we've got a decent grid for the sprint. Not as exciting, I would say, as the grid for tomorrow's race, the main event tomorrow, but it's still exciting. You've got, you know, the top 4, top 5 there. Unbelievable drivers: Verstappen, Leclerc, Hamilton, Norris, and Piastri. I can definitely see position changes with Hamilton and Leclerc, Norris and Piastri maybe making progress. Sergio Perez, you would imagine, has a decent chance of moving up. Russell, of course, from 11th will move up. Alonso possibly from 12th. So it should be a decent sprint race. Nothing special because, again, it's only 19 laps. But it should be definitely at points entertaining, which, of course, is what the sprint race is for. But let me come back to here and get back up on the screen the timer, as we have got how long? We've got an hour and 21 minutes to go until the sprint begins. So now that we've gone through the results of sprint qualifying and what is the starting grid, let's now go through team by team and look at really how they've been this weekend with their performance and just how I think they'll fare in the sprint. Just to clarify, I have not made a prediction graphic. I think I was going to, but then I just forgot. normally it's part of my routine to do it for a normal qualifying and a normal race session, but for the sprint race, normally I don't do it. So yeah, that's why I ended up forgetting. But I think what I'll do is I'll go through the top three. I'll go through the top. Actually, I'll go through the first 5 teams, and then I'll let you guys know what my actual prediction is. I'm not going to predict the whole top 5. I'll predict the what do you call it? I'm not going to predict the whole top 10. I meant, but I will give you my top 5 for the sprint today. But let's go through the teams, and we'll start with Red Bull Racing, who I do still think, even despite what happened yesterday and with them only just about ending up on pole for the sprint today, I do still think they've got the best car this weekend, but it is by a much, much smaller margin than I expected. And I think much smaller margin than really anybody, even Red Bull, expected this weekend. And yeah, very exciting to see Ferrari and Mercedes and McLaren all very close to Red Bull in sprint qualifying. That is really what we want to see, and hopefully it makes for an exciting sprint. I have to say though, and I think you guys may agree with this, if you look at the sprint races that we've had ever since, even if you go back to 2021, Red Bull, they do tend to be weaker, I feel like, on a sprint weekend than they do on a normal weekend. If you look at, obviously, the last sprint weekend a couple weeks ago, Piastri ended up taking pole and winning the sprint. Earlier this year, you had Leclerc take pole in Baku. Last year, you had, you had Red Bull struggle, I think, at one of the sprints. I can't remember. I think it was Brazil, wasn't it? Where they only finished in 4th place. And even in 2021, I think there was at least one sprint where they didn't really do that well compared to how they were normally doing that season. So I think Red Bull, they just don't like the sprint format in terms of the way they normally conduct their business on a race weekend. I don't know if it's because they like to have more time than other teams to set the car up properly. Possibly that's why that is, but I have seen that trend with Red Bull, that on a sprint weekend, they just don't feel as ominous and as dominant as they are normally. So, yeah, let me know in the chat, your thoughts on that and why you think that could be. That's just a feeling of mine. But yeah, Red Bull just have not been as strong. I think another reason why they've not been as strong is because in the middle sector there is quite a few more slow corners, and the Red Bull, despite it being an unbelievable car, it's not an amazing car in the slow corners. It's good, it's very good in the slow corners, but it's not anywhere near as good as it is in the high speed corners. So I think that is also playing a slight role. And we have seen, and we saw it in qualifying, and of course we'll go through the data tomorrow in the build up to the race, looking back at qualifying and the sector times. In the middle sector, in those slow corners, they didn't seem to be very quick, but in the first and the final sector, where the corners were a bit quicker, they were a lot more like the Red Bull we all know. So I think that is playing a factor. Maybe the bumps of this track might be playing a factor as well. I think it's hard to say if that is, though. But I'm just bringing it up really as something that could be playing a role as to why Red Bull are not as quick. But yeah, I think definitely some of the slow corners here, plus it being a sprint weekend, is not exactly helping Red Bull have the most comfortable weekend they could possibly have. For the sprint today, though, with Max on pole, I think as long as he keeps the lead at the end of the first lap, I think he will go on to win. Not by a massive margin. I don't think he's going to win by like 10 seconds or something like that. I think, it'll probably be 3, maybe 4 seconds at most, or 5 seconds at most, because I do think Mercedes and McLaren are going to be pretty competitive in the sprint. So yeah, I don't think it will be anywhere near as dominant as we've seen in other sprint races from Red Bull. But yeah, I do think Max Verstappen will take the win. Sergio Perez, though, in 7th place. He's in for a tricky, very tricky sprint. I think he'll pass Carlos Sainz because I don't think Ferrari are going to have that great a pace in the sprint, at least for the second half of the sprint race. So I think he'll get past him, but I don't see him finishing in the top 5 because this weekend is just not quick enough. And also Red Bull not being as quick compared to the rest of the field is just not helping his lack of performance. So yeah, I think Sergio Perez will probably finish 6th in the sprint race, with Verstappen winning by 3, 4, maybe 5 seconds at the absolute most. So it will still be a successful sprint, just not quite as comfortable for Red Bull as they hoped. Mercedes-Benz, I feel as though, and I had this feeling with their qualifying yesterday, that their pace looks really strong. And of course, they've had that new floor upgrade, which is probably the reason why they've looked a lot stronger this weekend than they probably would have without it. But I do feel as though 3rd in qualifying yesterday for Hamilton, and even 3rd to a degree in qualifying today, isn't quite the best that maybe they could have done. I mean, we saw yesterday in qualifying, Hamilton had that shoddy middle sector, and that definitely, I think, cost him at least 1 position. I didn't watch sprint qualifying, so I can't know for sure what his final lap in quali was like, but I do get the feeling that Mercedes maybe could have at least, been a position higher on the grid. But I think in the sprint today, I think Mercedes will probably be 2nd best. Not by a massive margin. It'll be close between Mercedes and McLaren. Obviously, both McLarens in 4th and 5th place. But with Lewis Hamilton, I think he will pass Leclerc at some point during the sprint, because I think the Mercedes will have a better overall pace than the Ferrari will. And then, I think probably by the time he does pass Leclerc, whenever that is, it'll be, it'll probably be, there won't be, as many laps left as he needs if he's going to try and catch and pass Max Verstappen, even if he, has the pace to do that. So I think 2nd for Hamilton is a realistic expectation. So that's what I'll go for with him. For George Russell, I don't really see anything that good coming out of this sprint with him starting in 11th. He's been very slow compared to Hamilton for most of the weekend, and his performance in the sprint a couple hours ago was not very good. So I think 7th or 8th is probably what he's heading for, which is, of course, is a poor result for him. But yeah, Hamilton finishing 2nd, that would be a good result. And then, of course, tomorrow they've got a big day where they could legitimately put up a really strong challenge to win the US Grand Prix and take their first win of the 2023 season. It's still amazing to even say that. Ferrari, Charles Leclerc has been absolutely brilliant so far this weekend. The pole position yesterday was very, very good. His performance was great throughout the session and throughout. It's been really great since practice 1, because of course in practice 1 he was up there in 2nd place. So yeah, great to see Leclerc back and in good form. And it has been said, I don't know if it's been said by Leclerc, but I have seen, I think, one F1 analyst say that since Ferrari's last upgrade in Japan, which was a new floor, ever since then, Leclerc has been a lot better. And the reason that is because it's eliminated some of the things in the car that he didn't like, such as the understeer, and just the general feeling of the car is a lot better and more so is closer to what he wants from the car. So that's why Leclerc has been ahead of Sainz ever since the Japanese Grand Prix and will probably remain that way until the end of the season. So, yeah, good to see him back in form. And in second, I don't think his chances are that bad, to be honest. I mean, we do expect with Ferrari, because of their, what we normally see with them wearing their tyres out more so than other teams. Obviously, we are all going to be expecting them to fall backwards through the field rather than, put up a fight against Max Verstappen. As I said, I do think Lewis Hamilton will get past Leclerc, but I'm not necessarily 100% sure that Leclerc will lose position to the McLarens. I don't know, I'm kind of 50-50, I would say, on that right now. I think it's going to be really close between Leclerc, Norris, Piastri, and even Hamilton to a degree, and it should be a great fight for those few positions. Carlos Sainz back in 6th. His fight, I think, really is with Sergio Perez, and I think he'll probably lose that fight by the time we get to the end of the race and finish probably 7th in the sprint. But yeah, Leclerc, I think, has definitely got a good chance of finishing on the podium in this sprint, which would be, I think, a very good result for him. And hopefully, if he was to finish 2nd or 3rd, that'd give him some good confidence going into tomorrow, where, of course, he's starting from pole position for the first time since Baku, which was a very long time ago, it feels like. So, yeah, Leclerc, 3rd or 4th. I'll have a think about that in the next few minutes before I make my final prediction for the top 5. But yeah, I think Ferrari won't be that bad in the sprint. We'll just quickly go through the next couple teams. Aston Martin have not been anywhere close to what do you call it, to a front-running team. They've been not even a midfield team. They've been more like back markers. They've been really terrible. And it's not necessarily because there's a lack of pace in the car. Again, I think it's been caused by the brake issues in practice 1, which caused a lack of running. And they've had to be, dealing with that. And they've not really had the appropriate time to get the car set up correctly for the rest of the race weekend, and they are compromised going forward. I mean, Fernando Alonso starting 12th for the sprint is not necessarily terrible, but I don't really think they've got a great chance at all of grabbing a point in this sprint, which is not good at all. Because, of course, remember, going into this sprint, McLaren are only 11 points behind them in the Constructors' Championship. If McLaren were to finish the sprint where they're starting from, they would score 9 points. And if Aston Martin finish where they do, obviously be 0. So it's going to be possibly a very bad day for them. And I think Alonso probably will finish 9th, 10th at best. I'm feeling more like 10th is probably where he'll finish. I think he will grab a position, but I don't see him just flying up into 8th place and easily grabbing a point. I just don't think Aston Martin's weekend is going to end up being a good one, unfortunately. So, yeah, Alonso obviously in 12th, Stroll in 14th. If you're an Aston Martin fan, I wouldn't be expecting really anything at all. And that goes for the race as well tomorrow, because obviously tomorrow they're starting 17th and 19th on the grid, which is absolutely horrific. And the final front-running team we'll go on to is McLaren. 4th and 5th doesn't sound great, considering their form lately, but, I mean, Lando Norris was only a 10th of a second away from pole, so I don't think the performance of the McLaren is that bad. I think what is making McLaren not look as strong this weekend is Ferrari being randomly a lot quicker than expected, and also Mercedes being a lot quicker than expected, which is probably because of the upgrade to their floor. So, yeah, that's, I think, what is giving off the impression that McLaren have not been very quick this weekend, when they are still very quick. They're just, those couple things are just making it look worse than it actually is. Of course, we have to remember Lando Norris is on the front row of the grid for tomorrow's race, so McLaren's pace is still very good. But yeah, 4th and 5th, good starting position, and if Hamilton can pass Leclerc quickly, in the first 5 laps, then I think they've got a decent, if not a very good chance of then getting themselves past Leclerc with at least one of their cars and grabbing a podium in the sprint, which has to be the aim. I think 2nd and 3rd in the sprint would be a really amazing result. It would need to be really the perfect sprint for them to get that. I think the best really you can hope for is probably 3rd and 5th. I think that's the absolute best realistically, given it's only 19 laps. But yeah, I think they've got a good chance of a podium. Lando Norris most likely will get that. Piastri, unfortunately, has not quite been on the same pace as Lando, who's looked very good so far this weekend. So yeah, I think, and I may as well make my predictions now for the sprint for my. Actually, you know what? I'll do the whole top 10 for my sprint prediction. So Verstappen, I think, will win. 2nd, I'm going to go Lewis Hamilton. 3rd, I am going to go Leclerc, and the reason I think he'll hang on is because of the Ferrari's very strong straight line speed, because we know the McLarens are not very quick in a straight line, which I think will hurt them trying to pass the Ferrari in the sprint today. So I'm going to go, Leclerc 3rd, Norris 4th, Piastri 5th, Perez 6th, Sainz in 7th, and then Russell in 8th. And then 9th, I'll go Pierre Gasly in 9th place. And then 10th, I'll probably go with Fernando Alonso. So, of course, remember, the top 8 are the only ones that score points in the sprint. So, if it was to finish that way, then Lewis Hamilton would cut the gap down to Perez in the championship to 25 points in the battle for 2nd. McLaren would only be 2 points behind Aston Martin in the Constructors' Championship. So there would be some stories coming away from the sprint if that was to happen. But let's hope for, say, more position changes than I have gone for. Let me know in the live chat, guys, what is your prediction for the sprint? Do you think that Verstappen will win? Do you think Hamilton will win? Leclerc? Norris? Let me know in the poll at the top of the live chat. And in general, just give me your top 5 for the sprint today. Let me know who your top 5 is for this sprint. And then in the next hour or so, I'll try and read out as many predictions as I can before we get to the conclusion of the build-up. But I think what I'll do now is just go through the rest of the teams, and then we'll get to your comments in chat. So, yeah, we'll go on to Alpine. Not a very good sprint qualifying. Pierre Gasly starts in 9th place, which is not bad, but I mean, when you look at yesterday where they were so quick and they locked out the 4th row of the grid, definitely there was a lot more possible in that sprint quali, especially with Esteban Ocon, only 13th, which was quite the surprise, I have to say, given how good he's been in the last few races. So yeah, 9th and 13th on the grid is not that good. Really, their fight, if they're going to grab any point from this sprint, their fight is with Russell and Alonso, and Pierre Gasly will be the one fighting, of course, for it. I do expect Gasly to pass Albon because I don't think the Williams has the enough pace in the 19-lap sprint to hold on to a top 10 position. So, yeah, I think Gasly will definitely beat him, but I just think Russell in the Mercedes that is pretty quick this weekend, I think will just be too quick for Pierre. But that is, Russell, and then Alonso is really who his main fights are in this sprint. Ocon, I think, will probably finish around about where he is. And then, obviously tomorrow is what Alpine are really looking at rather than today, because tomorrow they, have a great starting position, and I'm sure we'll have a better day and a better result tomorrow. Williams, unbelievable sprint qualifying from Alexander Albon, but I just don't see Albon holding on to a top 10 position. Starts, of course, in 8th because of Russell's penalty, but he did an amazing effort in sprint qualifying, but I would be surprised if he could hold on in the top 10. Maybe he can grab 11th place, but even with that very strong straight line speed from the Williams, I think it will just be too much for him to hang on. And we saw in Friday qualifying yesterday, the Williams is the slowest car this weekend. So, I'd be very surprised if we'd hang on the top 10. But, great effort anyway. Once again showing just how great of a season Alexander Albon has had. Logan Sargent starting last once again. And I know it's a track he's never raced at before, but still, poor performance being that far behind his teammate. But, great starting position for Albon, but I don't think they'll be grabbing a point. Alfa Romeo are 15th and 18th on the grid. They've not really been quick at all this weekend. I think they're about second slowest team, so I don't really expect anything from them. Again, good to see though. Zhou Guan Yu, if I can find him. There you go. Good to see him out qualifying Bottas yesterday and today. Haas F1 have been a shower of shit. Their upgrade has been absolute wank as far as I'm concerned. This upgrade, they've been banging on for weeks about it. It's basically a B car. It's a complete redesign of the side pod area and the floor area, and basically the entire part of the car from the cockpit backwards. And they look worse now than they did 2 weeks ago. So it just sums up this team. No matter what they do during a season, they just never get better. They start off well, how big their team is, and then they just fall off a cliff. They, rinse and repeat. They do it every single season, and this year is no different. And then finally, AlphaTauri. Here is Daniel Ricciardo earlier, or actually yesterday, going off the track. Ricciardo, I think, apologised on the radio for only ending up in 11th place, but I don't think he really has anything to apologise for, because I don't think really he could have done that much better than what he did. So, it's a good starting position. Of course, he'll be starting from 10th because of Russell's penalty. So, I don't think you can really complain about Ricciardo's performance. I think he did, I think he did the best he could. Did Daniel. Yuki Tsunoda had a quite eventful sprint qualifying from what I heard. He had some sort of, was it contact with someone in sprint qualifying 1, and then the team, for some reason, didn't send him out in enough time to get his final lap in, and that's why he ended up in 19th place. So Tsunoda can definitely go quicker. We saw that yesterday, obviously qualified for the race tomorrow in 11th place. So AlphaTauri's pace is good. It's just not great. And it's not as good, say, as Alpine. Wasn't as good in the sprint quali as Williams, but I think they'll be definitely better in this sprint race, and I think tomorrow in the race, obviously, they will be as well. So it's not been a bad weekend. It's just not been anything great, unfortunately, for the AlphaTauri team. But there you go. Those are my thoughts for all the teams and drivers going into this sprint race beginning in just under 1 hour's time. One thing I am going to do quickly, though, is just hide the timer because I just want to plug my next piece of content. So make sure, guys, to join me tomorrow night for the main event of the weekend. I will be live tomorrow from 6 p.m. UK time. 2 hours, that is, before the race starts for the 2023 US Grand Prix. We'll be live from 6 p.m. all the way through till 10 p.m. And then the next stream after that will be on Thursday, live at 8 p.m. UK time for the Mexico City Grand Prix weekend preview. So if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this because we do qualifying and race watch-alongs for F3 Grand Prix. And for everybody watching right now as well, make sure to smash the like button. We are currently on 20 likes. Let's try and get up to 30 plus likes if we can. That'd be great if we could. And of course, it does help the channel in the algorithm, as I will just quickly look on Twitter to see if there is any news that I can bring you guys ahead of this sprint. And let me just have a quick look. And no, can't see anything really at all. Let me just have a further scroll. And yeah, I can't see anything. The last piece of news was that Russell has been given a 3-place penalty, which of course, I brought you that news at the start of the stream. But let's get into some of your comments in the chat, and make sure to keep them coming. And as well, if you've just joined, please let me know what your top 5 prediction is for the sprint this evening or this afternoon, this morning, wherever you are in the world. Ken Wallace says Lewis's lap in the sprint was less than a tenth to Max. You can't argue with that, especially when you look at George's crap performance. Well, as I said yesterday in qualifying, he didn't do his personal best middle sector at the end of qualifying. Of course, he ended up ahead of Verstappen because Max had his time deleted. But yeah, we have seen in the last few races Lewis not be as good in qualifying as we know he can be. That's why I was bringing that up. Mickey asks, will we get a clean first lap? Hopefully. Obviously, last year in the race, Carlos Sainz was taken off by George Russell. Normally, we do have contact, but it tends to be, a lot of the time, more in the midfield than it does up front. So, yeah. And yeah, Ken Wallace saying Aston Martin are abysmal, 1.5 seconds off pole. Oh dear, Fernando. Looney Classics saying, sorry, Chaz, but England has no winning mentality. And yeah, just commenting about how England have lost to South Africa in the Rugby World Cup. I'll be honest, I don't. And this is, I'm not saying this in a bad way, but I don't care that England have lost to South Africa. I absolutely hate rugby. It's so boring to me. And given how, and I will, this is a joke. I don't mean this that seriously, but I do find it a bit cringeworthy when I'm, sat in a pub and, there's rugby on and certain people that watch rugby. I do find it, funny when England in the rugby lose because I just I just don't like rugby at all. So yeah, I don't mind at all. The only things I really care about England doing well in is obviously football, cricket to a very certain extent, or specific extent. The only time I care about the England cricket team is when it's the Ashes. I don't care about all the other competitions. So yeah, I don't really care. Crystal Racing saying Haas need to fuck off and let Andretti in. Well, there's been, a lot of chatter, hasn't there, been about the value that teams bring. There's been lots of bullshit talk about that when Haas, as far as I'm concerned, would definitely bring less value to Formula One than Andretti would. Because one, Andretti have partnered up with was it General Motors? So you've got that. Plus Andretti are a more popular racing team. More people know who Andretti are globally than in the motorsport world than Haas. And obviously there's they just in general have more success. So it's funny to me that Haas, try to sit there and say, oh well, what would Andretti bring to Formula One? Well, they definitely fucking bring more than you. Chazza, do you think Lewis can win the race tomorrow? Asks Glenny. I haven't really thought about it that much yet, so I'm not sure. But I think there is definitely a chance of it happening. I think the problem for Hamilton, though, if I was to just quickly comment on that, I think the main problem for Hamilton is we know Ferrari's race pace is going to be an issue tomorrow, but he is not in the best position to capitalize from that. Lando Norris is. So that's who his main, obviously Verstappen is his main rival for the win, but if Verstappen for whatever reason can't win, then it's Norris he needs to watch out for and try, of course, and get ahead of Lando. So yeah, we'll see tomorrow, but I haven't really decided yet in my head as to what is going to happen tomorrow. It's really up in the air as to who is going to win the race tomorrow. You could have legitimately 3 different teams having a really good chance of winning. McLaren, Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari less so because of their tyre problems. Mickey says the block by Russell should be penalty, not heard anything. Yeah, it has been given. It has been given as a 3-place penalty. And it is that 3-place penalty for Russell is, to confirm, it is for the sprint. It is not for the race tomorrow. It is only for the sprint today, which is good that they limit the, any violations in sprint qualifying. Thankfully, they limit to the actual just sprint day. Himesh says they definitely need to let Andretti in. F1 needs more competition and representation. Think about it, it's an international sport with mostly European drivers. I mean, factually, yes, it's an international sport, but it isn't really. It's basically a European sport. I mean, that's how it started out. It was, these rich people really all across Europe decided to race their cars against each other. What was it? Over 70 years ago. That's how F1 started, and still to its fundamental core, it's a European sport. But we should encourage teams outside of Europe to join the grid. I've got zero problem with American teams in Formula One. And the thing is, with Haas, is if you had asked me at the end of 2018, which was the end of Haas's third F1 season, what I thought of Haas being an F1 and whether I thought they were a good addition, or a great addition, I would have said absolutely 100%, because what they did, no matter how that those results, those great results they had in this first 3 years came about, they were very competitive, especially in 2018, where they finished in the top 5 of the championship, and they were legitimately a very quick, competitive team. But since then, mostly they've just been a joke. And then, the most popular part of the team is not their results necessarily. It's, Gunther Steiner being popular for swearing and just being a character. I don't think really they've added that much to Formula One that, if you compare it to other teams, what they've added in the past, that are no longer on the grid. And again, with Andretti, you cannot tell me they would add less to Formula One than Haas have. So, yeah, if if it was an ultimatum as to you have to have either Haas or Andretti on the grid, I'm taking Andretti every day of the week. No doubt about it. But, what do you call it? Ideally, I'd like Haas to stay on the grid because I want there to be more teams. I would like there to be at least 12 teams on the grid. We did have that when I started watching Formula One in 2011, 2012. 24 cars on the grid is, I think, about right for what Formula One needs. More competition is great. Not just from a team perspective, but also it allows, drivers more chances to get onto the grid. So, yeah, my hope is that they will get onto the grid. That was actually a story with Andretti that came out, I think it was yesterday or on Thursday, that Andretti have already built a 2023 Formula One car, or, well, let me rephrase that. They've built a car that is for these regulations, and they apparently, is it this week or next week, they're actually going to be testing it in a Toyota, or in the Toyota wind tunnel in Cologne in Germany. I did see a story about that. I think, was it earlier today or yesterday? So they're very serious, Andretti. I mean, they, the deal with Renault, for Renault to power them, and be the engine supplier, they secured that deal, I think, was it last year? So Andretti has been, ever since they've had their hearts set on getting into Formula One, they've been very serious. They've gone out there, secured deals, with General Motors, what do you call it? Renault, and then obviously built a spec car, just to see, how competitive, I guess, they can be if they come into Formula One in 2025. So, if you compare Andretti's bid to get onto the grid to other teams we've had in the past, such as Haas and Manor, Caterham, HRT, teams like that, Andretti feel more serious, definitely, than any of those other teams were when they were trying to get onto the grid. And with Haas, a big part of them coming onto the grid was their was the deal they secured with Ferrari, where Ferrari would, and they still do, supply parts to the Haas team, and it really helped the Haas team in their first 2 or 3 years. So, yeah. Let's have a look at some further comments if we can. Crystal Racing saying Penske also once had a F1 team in the 70s, but packed it in after John Watson's win in Austria, 1977. Yeah. I am surprised that what's his name? Is it Roger Penske? The guy who, runs the Penske Motorsport operation. I am surprised that they've not been back since, given there was definitely, in terms of the financial viability, there was definitely good opportunities to re-enter Formula One in the 80s, the 90s, maybe even the very early 2000s as well. And even now, it's definitely more possible. So I am surprised that they've not thought about maybe having another crack at Formula One, but fair enough if they don't want to. But, if we can get Andretti onto the grid, that's obviously the 11th team. And then in terms of who the 12th team would be, maybe Porsche as a proper works team. But I don't think realistically that's going to happen, because Porsche, or the people running that operation, of course, they are under the same umbrella as Audi, the VW group. What do you call it? With Porsche, they want to, I think, buy out an existing team, or buy at least half of the team. And I think they may have offered that to Williams. Was it last year? And I think Williams may have rejected it. I think that was what happened. Or was it? Oh no, it wasn't Williams. It was Red Bull, wasn't it? Yeah, it was Red Bull, and Red Bull were uncomfortable with that, so they decided to partner up with Ford. Even though the actual powertrain design and development will be done by Red Bull, Ford will be helping with that, but it will still be Red Bull powertrains as the main, figurehead behind it all. Vinster says Andretti is open wheel racing in America. Michael knows what's up. I think they'd hit the ground running, immediate midfield team. Yeah, I think they'd be. I don't think there'd be a back marker, because from how they've conducted their operation already, they do seem very serious. So, yeah, I don't think they would fuck around with the driver choice. I don't think they'd immediately start hiring pay drivers like Haas have done a couple times. Esteban Gutierrez being one. Mazepin, obviously, being another. I don't think they would go down that route. I think they would just pick the 2 best drivers they could get. And obviously, the 2 best drivers for chemistry as well going forward. And obviously, Renault as an engine supplier realistically was the only one they could get anyway, because all the other engine manufacturers I don't think really are keen on supplying anyone else, and Renault are desperate to supply other teams other than themselves to try and show that Renault power is good in any way when we know it's not. So yeah, I'd definitely be interested to see who they would hire as drivers if they came onto the grid in 2025, because I mean, yeah, they could hire maybe a driver from IndyCar. Don't think necessarily though that's a guarantee. I could see them doing it though. I think there's definitely a decent chance that they do that. Maybe they'll hire Alex Palou, someone like that, or Colton Herta, I think was another one, wasn't it, last year that they were AlphaTauri were looking at to put in the car for this year. So maybe that would happen, but yeah, it'd be certainly interesting to see who they'd go for. And I do wonder if Renault are powering them, whether they might agree some sort of deal in terms of having Alpine Academy drivers possibly having the chance to race for Andretti. Because Alpine do have a couple very good drivers in their academy. Victor Martins is one, who was F3 champion in 2022 and has had a decent, maybe good year, you could argue. And I think definitely next year is going to be a strong contender for the championship in F2. Obviously, you've got Jack Doohan, and then you've got other drivers in F3 and lower down that maybe could be something in the future. So I do wonder maybe they'll have a look at some of the Alpine Academy drivers if they do have a Renault power deal. Aline asks, do you think Helmut Marko will get fired? Of course, if you guys haven't heard, apparently there's an inner power struggle at Red Bull that could be forcing Helmut Marko out of the team. Fired might not be the right way of putting it. I think I could see him resigning or retiring, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure he'll be fired. I think it will be a lot more. It won't be as bad as that. I think, given how old Helmut is, I think Helmut's 80 plus years old. I think he'll, given how old he is and how much work he's done for Red Bull and in motorsport, I think maybe at the end of the season he'll decide to call it quits. But I'm not quite sure the chances of even that. Laurie Rastogi says, still a bit skeptical of Norris in terms of winning championships. Is he better than Verstappen, Leclerc, or even Russell in terms of raw speed? He's talented, but is he a truly great driver? I think he can be. He's definitely got the talent. But I think one thing, what do you call it? Sorry, I just saw a comment from Count Blast. Says, Chazza, what on this flat earth are you doing around a sprint race? Well, there's nothing else to do at this time, so I thought, why not do a watch along for the sprint? Plus, it might actually be good around this track. With Norris, one thing you need to remember is you don't need to win a world championship. You don't need to be the best driver on the grid. We need to dispel that myth, because lots of drivers in the last 30 years have not been the best driver on the grid, yet they've won not just the championship, they've won more than one. For example, Jenson Button in 2009, great season, and at that time he was absolutely brilliant, but I think even he would say he was not the best driver in the world in that particular time period. I think Lewis Hamilton was still better, definitely quicker, and then you could maybe say Sebastian Vettel. Obviously had Alonso at that time, but Jenson had a great year, did absolutely everything he needed to do, and obviously in the first 7 races of that season, the Brawn car was incredibly quick, and whilst it was, he delivered the results he needed to. Obviously, Nico Rosberg in 2016 wasn't the best driver in the world at that time, but he still won. Mika Hakkinen even in 98 and 99. Hakkinen was a great driver, but he was not better than Michael Schumacher. And even though their rivalry was great, this might be controversial to say, but I don't think at any point during that era was Hakkinen legitimately better than Michael Schumacher. Maybe faster in qualifying, but I don't think overall was better than Michael Schumacher. But he didn't need to be, because the McLaren car almost all of the time was quicker than the Ferrari by quite a big margin, and he delivered what he needed to in the car, and that's why he won 2 world championships. You keep going on. Damon Hill, Jacques Villeneuve, other examples where they weren't the best driver in the world at that time, and they still won the championship. Basically, what Norris needs is the best car. Because, yes, I don't believe he is as good as Max Verstappen, but if he can have a car at some point, whether it's next year or in 2026 or in 5 years from now, whenever, if he can have a car that is legitimately the best car on the grid by a good amount of lap time, then he won't need to be the best on the grid. He'll just need to be good enough, and then he'll be a champion. So, yeah. But we'll see, of course, if McLaren ever produce that, which I have to say, my hopes for that are not very high. Let me just try and find some other comments. So actually, before I do, I need to post a link of the stream out a couple more times, and then we'll get on to more of your comments. But yeah, let me know what you thought of what I just said there about Norris and the possibility of him being a champion in the future. I mean, I did a video last summer saying that I thought he'd have a very similar career to Jenson Button, where it would, despite him being so talented and so quick, I think it will depend on being at the right team at the right time if he's actually going to win a championship. Come join us. No, hold on, let me just post this out. Come join us to watch along the F1 sprint in Texas. And let me just post it out on Twitter quickly. And I'll have a look on Twitter to see if there's any news I can bring you guys quickly. Come join us here to watch along the F1 sprint at the US GP. And there you go. Right, so we have got 26 minutes to go. This build-up has absolutely flown by so far, just like yesterday. Yeah, 26 minutes to go until the sprint begins. So make sure to let me know, if you haven't already, your top 5 prediction for the sprint. And if you've got any other further questions or whatever, then make sure to post them in the chat. And I will try and get to as many as I can before lights out. And as well, as I said earlier, there is a poll running in the live chat where I've asked you guys, who will win the F1 sprint today in Texas? Will it be Verstappen, Leclerc, Hamilton, or Norris? Those are the top 4 on the grid in that order. So let me know out of those 4 who you think wins the sprint today. And of course, make sure, if you haven't already, to smash that like button. Laurie says, hold on. Laurie says true, but if Norris was up against a better teammate, would his performances look as good? I see your point. I think, though, I mean, Piastri already has been better, I would say, even though he's not won a race like Ricciardo did. I think Piastri's been better than Ricciardo was at McLaren. But even despite that, Lando has still, most of the time, beat Oscar Piastri in qualifying or the race. I think in qualifying, is it 13-5 in qualifying? And in the race, Lando beats Oscar almost every time. So he is he's an absolutely brilliant driver. I think right now is probably one of the top 5 drivers in the world is Lando Norris. But I still wouldn't say he's not Verstappen or Hamilton level as far as I'm concerned. But, let's hope McLaren keep having a competitive car like they are now, and we'll get to see possibly more evidence that Lando is on their level. Vinster says, Norris feels he can't beat Max. He needs to change that mindset before he actually will. I don't know if that's actually true, that Lando thinks he can't beat Max. I think he probably thinks he can, but I think he also knows just how mentally good Max is. And I do think it would be a mistake for Lando to go to Red Bull, because that would, as far as I'm concerned, mostly guarantee that he is not going to win a championship, because the best driver at Red Bull will be the champion if they've got the best car, and Lando is not better than Max as far as I'm concerned. So again, his best chance of winning a title is to not be in the same car as Verstappen, which is why I hope he doesn't end up at Red Bull in the future. Miss Marquis says, Chazza, that's a valid point about world champion, not necessarily the driver with most skill. Remember years ago when Lewis Hamilton wasn't able to beat Daniel Ricciardo in same machinery / track on Top Gear? True. Yeah. Those Top Gear lap times is the true measure of who the GOAT is. As all the cars are pretty much parked up on the grid now, so we've got just over 20 minutes to go until lights out. Looney Classic says, there are drivers in the past who were just as talented as Lewis, Max, and Senna, but never got the car to win. I look at whether you drove to the best of your ability or not to determine greatness. Yeah, I didn't look at it that way in the past, 4 or 5 years ago, but nowadays that's what I personally look at is, did you do the best you could on this day, in respect to how your teammate performed? That's how I view driver performances at the moment, and hopefully I'll view it in that way from now on. And that's why, for example, outside of Max Verstappen, Fernando Alonso is my... Actually, let me rephrase that. Max Verstappen is the best driver of the season. He's the best driver in the world. But the second best driver this season, in my opinion, is Fernando Alonso. Because if you look at this season, he has done the best he could in that car, more so than everybody else in their respective cars compared to their respective teammates. And that's why I still rate Fernando so highly, and still Fernando for me is one of the top 3-4 drivers in the world, and he has been, Fernando, really for the last 20 years. So not really a hot take. to be honest. As Simon Lazenby, Danica Patrick, and Jenson Button on the grid. Just chatting about what's going to happen in the sprint here. One thing I have noticed is a lot more cloud cover, which I don't think was forecast a couple days ago when I looked at the weather. So it will be a bit cooler for this sprint than maybe previously forecast, which should help this team on screen, Ferrari. Willifon Gaming says Norris really did the best he could in 2021 and 2022. Yeah, I'd agree with that. McLaren from races, even though you can't stand sprints, it's good that you're live streaming, Shazza. There's going to be more and more over the coming seasons, so reluctantly we will have to embrace them. Yeah, well, thankfully, next season we are having no more sprint races than what we have at the moment. Next season there will be 6 sprint races. It hasn't been announced yet where those will be. Most of them will probably still be at the same tracks. You know, Baku, Red Bull Ring, Sao Paulo, maybe this track again next year. But yeah, we did hear, I think earlier, was it back in May, after the Baku sprint race, that F1 wanted to increase the sprint races to 10 for 2024. Thankfully, they didn't accomplish that, but maybe they will for 2025. So like you say, we're gonna have to get used to this. Let me see if there's any other comments I can find. Laurie says Norris didn't beat Sainz in first 2 seasons. It was early in his career, but it gives me doubts about him. I understand why, but I think there's a couple of things you need to remember. One, obviously, you know, the Lando Norris in 2019 and 2020 was not the best version of Lando Norris. But secondly, Carlos Sainz, I don't think at Ferrari has been as good as he was at McLaren. I think at times he has been as good at Ferrari as he was at McLaren, but if you look at last year, for example, that was not the Carlos Sainz we saw at McLaren. And even in the first half of this season, I would say it wasn't the same Carlos Sainz as what we saw at McLaren. It's been hit and miss with Carlos, I would say, at Ferrari. So, yeah, I understand why you think that. And I think if Piastri turns out to be as good as we hope he will be, then this will be in the, you know, next year and the year after. This will be when we really find out how good Lando Norris is. My feeling is he will still be just about better than Piastri, but it's too hard to say who next year or the year after is going to be the better driver. It's just too early for me to say. How long have we got? Right, just over 15 minutes. Let me see if I can find any more comments. Crystal Racing saying, I don't see Norris or Russell surpassing Rosberg or Kimi's career achievements. Well, Kimi, didn't he win, was it 21 races? And obviously won a championship as well. So that's, you know, pretty good. Obviously, Russell has only won 1 race. Norris still hasn't won a race. Leclerc has won... How many races has Leclerc won? Is it 6, I think? So, yeah, I think a few of those, you know, of the younger drivers on the grid, your Norrises, Russells, Leclercs, I think they'll struggle to get up to 20 Grand Prix victories in the next 5 years. but we'll see what happens. Again, in the current era of Formula One, it mostly depends on how good your car is. So that's really what we need to be looking at. As to, you know, the type of career Lando Norris, George Russell, or Charles Leclerc is going to have. And don't get me wrong, Max Verstappen is an unbelievable driver. He is a generational talent, but being in the best car does help. And he's even said it that, driving the best car absolutely helps him, look maybe more dominant compared to the others as it is in reality. So, yeah. Right, let's read out a few more comments and then we'll get into this sprint. Looney Classics says Max or Lewis are not the best racers in the world. They are the best out of the luckiest to make it. Maybe there is someone out there that could beat both of them, but they never got the chance. I see where you're coming from, but I don't agree with you on that. There is definitely people in karting who unfortunately do have to give it up because they can't afford it anymore. I think even there's been, some F1 drivers have commented on it that, certain friends they made along the way in karting, they just stopped because they couldn't afford to race anymore. So I see your point, but I think at the end of the day, if you are that good, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, Michael Schumacher, Ayrton Senna levels of good, I think you're going to get unlimited chances. And I think even though Anthony Hamilton, Lewis Hamilton's father, had to do, a lot of work to financially support Lewis's karting career, because of how good Lewis was, he was going to get more opportunities than others. Because, again, he was clearly, from a very young age, such a great talent. And that is, that's unfortunately, that's the way it is. If you are a generational talent, you're going to get more chances than others. Maybe, there is a few drivers out there or a few people out there that could have been F1 drivers had they had the finances to continue, but I don't think they would have been, superstar level of drivers. Laurie Rastogi says, I feel like Leclerc's raw pace is really, really strong. I said if he can iron out mistakes, he's clearly better than Norris and Russell. I wouldn't say he's clearly better, but yeah, I think definitely an argument can be made that he is better. Let me see if there's a couple more comments I can find before we get into this sprint. As you can see, Daniel Ricciardo just getting ready to get in the car. Crystal Racing saying only football gets the best possible athletes available due to its popularity. Well, obviously in football there isn't a financial wall preventing talents from actually making it in football, because it's not about, in football, that's the great thing about football, that's why I love football, is because it doesn't matter how poor of a background you've come from, if you're good enough, you'll play and you'll succeed in football. When with motorsport, you need to be talented, but if you also need to know the right people and have the right connections. Most drivers need that. For example, Sergio Perez, he's had a great career, and obviously he won GP2, But if he didn't have the backing that he had, probably wouldn't have had as many opportunities as he has had compared to others. I'm not, even though I love Perez, I'm not going to pretend like that's not the case. Yeah, he's definitely had more opportunities than others because of his financial backing, because that is, very important to certain teams. And plus, again, connections really does help in the world of motorsport. And that is the one thing fundamentally that I would love to see changed with motorsport, is it not to matter as much about your financial connections or financial background as to whether you make it or not, and it be more like football, where the financial side of your your background doesn't really matter, and who you're connected with doesn't really matter. I'd love it if it was that way, but it's never going to be like it is in football. But if we can get closer to that, then I think it would just make motorsport, especially participation, much better. Yeah, Crystal Racing saying in the chat, Kimi only reached F1 because he randomly met the Robertson family. Yeah, well, Kimi Räikkönen, that it's a great example of someone who was incredibly talented and nobody saw coming, and just, incredibly, for what was at the time an incredibly young age, was super, super quick. And then, yeah, he had obviously a great agent, and that was, a great way for him to get into Formula One. And then once he got in, proved himself. I mean, he proved himself before in Junior Formula that he was definitely a very special driver. But yeah, in motorsport, it's definitely the whole, knowing the right people and having the right financial background or good financial connections with certain people. It's so much more important than it is in other sports like football, rugby, basketball, all of those other things. And that's why motorsport will never be as popular as football or as popular as basketball, say, is in America, because it's not necessarily, in terms of making it to Formula One, it's not necessarily available for everyone from every background to do, which is really sad. Rooksfoot saying in the chat, in the late 90s, we were taught in college about the huge financial barriers to entry in motorsport. Yeah, it's something that does need to be worked on. It's what do you call it? It's a long-term project, which I think would be great to see happen. Looney Classic says, I disagree with you, Chazza. If you are not in a first world country, you can kiss F1 dreams goodbye. So I know the 20 drivers are not the only best out of 8 billion people. Again, I'm going to stick with my feeling on this. I still think if you proved in karting that you were a generational talent, I think even if you were from a second or third world country, or maybe not all third world countries, but certain third world countries, I think you would still make it, maybe not to Formula One, but you would still make it in motorsport at some level. But anyway, we've got 6 minutes to go until the sprint is underway. So before we get into it, let me just finish up this poll in the chat. I asked you guys, who do you think will win the sprint today in Texas? 141 votes, and you guys, with 53% of the vote, voted for Max Verstappen, with Lewis Hamilton second on 24%, Charles Leclerc third on 14%, sorry, and then Lando Norris on 7%. I agree. I think Verstappen will win. And my prediction for the top 5, if you haven't heard it, is Verstappen to win, Hamilton second, Leclerc third, Norris fourth, and Piastri in fifth. Let me know your top 5 in the chat quickly before we get underway. But before we do, let me just quickly go through the championship standings before this sprint. Max Verstappen, of course, already the world champion. Sergio Perez, though, needs a decent points haul. He's only 30 points clear of Lewis Hamilton in third. Then you've got Fernando Alonso fourth, Carlos Sainz fifth, Leclerc sixth, Lando Norris in seventh, George Russell in eighth, with Oscar Piastri ninth, and Lance Stroll rounding up the top 10. And on the constructors side, of course, Red Bull, the constructors champions. Mercedes second, only 28 points clear of Ferrari. If they can outscore Ferrari today, that would be massive for them. And then you got, Ferrari third, Aston Martin fourth, and only 11 points clear of McLaren. They need some sort of point from today, Aston Martin, and need to hope as well that McLaren don't have a strong sprint race, or else it could be a very bad weekend for them. Alpine are in 6th, with Williams in 7th. Alfa Romeo got up to 8th after the last Grand Prix in Qatar. Haas are in 9th, with AlphaTauri last in 10th. But let's go through your starting grid for the F1 sprint in Texas. On the front row, it is Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc. An all-British second row of Lewis Hamilton and Lando Norris. On the third row, Oscar Piastri, who won the last sprint race in Qatar a couple of weeks ago, and Carlos Sainz. On the fourth row, Sergio Perez and the man he replaced at Red Bull, Alexander Albon. And completing the top 10, 2 ex-Red Bull drivers, Pierre Gasly, and a man who could be back at Red Bull next year, Daniel Ricciardo. Just outside the top 10, you've got George Russell and Fernando Alonso. In 13th and 14th, good friends Esteban Ocon and Lance Stroll. 15th and 16th is Zhou Guanyu and Nico Hülkenberg. Hülkenberg racing here for the first time since 2019. On the penultimate row of the grid, it's an all-Scandinavian row of Kevin Magnussen and Valtteri Bottas. On the back row of the grid, it is Yuki Tsunoda and Logan Sargent, of course, the American driver. Let's now get into this sprint, shall we? And the tyre compounds, if you're wondering what they are the C4, C3, and C2 compounds. So they've gone pretty soft this weekend with the tyre selection. Of course, I'll let you know as soon as I do as to who is starting on what compounds. There you can see on the left-hand side of your screen is the starting order. And of course, it will be a 19-lap race. Let me just try and move that text slightly up. There you go. And actually, let me try and move it slightly more over as well. And we will see what the teams have decided to start on tyres wise. I expect it to be the medium compound because the soft compound tyre, I do think, will wear out a bit too much in this sprint, especially with the long, hard corners we've got. I know it's not as hot today as it was yesterday, but it will still be quite hard on those soft compound tyres, and I think they will fall away quite badly after lap 10. As Lewis Hamilton just getting his gloves on. And there on the TV broadcast is Charles Leclerc with his green helmet. His NFL-themed helmet. And there is Max Verstappen, the current 3-time world champion. As all the tyre blankets come off. And I think I think Max might be on the mediums. I don't know though. I thought I saw a set of mediums. Yeah, he is on the mediums. Hamilton is as well. Looks like, a Ferrari is it Sainz? It is. So Carlos Sainz is on the soft compound tyre. So clearly Ferrari feel as though risk needs to be taken. But Verstappen, Leclerc, Hamilton are all on the mediums as the formation lap has begun. But it looks like to me almost everyone is on medium compound tyres. And of course, as soon as I can, I'll get it displayed on screen who is on what compound. And yeah, Carlos Sainz is on the soft tyre. And he's already 3 laps have been done on that compound. And he is the only person on the soft. Everybody else is on the medium compound tyre. So what I'll do is display this quickly and just change it now. So there you go. Oh God, no, not lowercase. There you go. So yeah, everyone on the medium except for Sainz on the soft. As Verstappen is just pulling onto the back straight now on this formation lap. And of course, remember, no mandatory pit stops, so they're going to try and eke out those tyres to the end of Ferrari with Sainz, which is going to be quite a job, especially after lap 10, which is, and I expect them to start really falling away. As the crowd just getting settled in. As we're looking on board now at Fernando Alonso. Let me just quickly yeah, just wanted to go back to those or that particular font because the other font was a bit too bright and bold compared to the text. So there you go, that's better. Anyway, Max Verstappen just pulling into the final corner now on this formation lap. As I've got a packed house for this sprint. Looks as packed as it is going to be possibly tomorrow as Christian Horner is on or in the Red Bull garage. Now Verstappen just doing a couple final burnouts like Leclerc is. And yeah, of course, last year, contact into turn 1, Carlos Sainz was took out of the race at turn 1. And remember, pole position does not have the inside line on the run up to turn 1. And that's why pole position does not tend to maintain the lead into turn 1 a lot of the time. So chances are we could see Verstappen lose the lead at the first corner. As almost the entire field are lined up. We're just waiting for the final few cars. And then we will be ready. So, this is the first ever sprint race in Texas. Who will take the inaugural win as all the cars line up now? Green flag waves, and here we go. The lights are on. It's 2, 3, 4, and 5 lights. And it's go in Texas, and Leclerc does get a good start. Verstappen does move across, though, very harshly. And Leclerc still forces his car up the inside. Verstappen gives him a bit extra room just to make sure they get through. Okay, and Hamilton gets up to second briefly. Can he maintain it? Yes, just about he does. I thought contact was going to be made. Thankfully, it was not. Great hard racing between Hamilton and Leclerc. Lewis just going right round the outside of Charles at turn 1 and looking very racy and close to Verstappen is Hamilton on this first lap. So it is Verstappen leading from Hamilton in second. Leclerc is third. Carlos Sainz has climbed a position up to fifth as there's an Alpine there getting close to a Williams, I think. The two Aston Martin side by side. Of course, Alonso and Stroll had a gigantic crash on this back straight last year. Hopefully not again, as there's a Haas of don't know who trying to overtake the two Aston Martins as the McLaren there of Piastri. I don't know if he was overtaking or defending against Sergio Perez, but both McLarens have lost position to Carlos Sainz. So Sainz has had a brilliant start here and is up, I believe, to 4th position. Yes, he is. So it is Verstappen from Hamilton, Leclerc, Sainz, Norris, Piastri, Perez, Russell up to 8th place. And then it's Gasly 9th and not Ricardo, Albon in 10th, as we are on lap 2 of 19. And all the cars just about settling down. As maybe not in the background, got an Alfa Romeo, or not an Alfa Romeo, got an Alfa Tauri of Yuki Tsunoda close to Nico Hulkenberg. But yeah, the top 10 is Verstappen, Hamilton, Leclerc, Sainz, Norris, Piastri, Perez, Russell, Gasly, and Albon. And then you've got Ocon in 11th, Ricciardo in 12th, Stroll 13th. Magnussen's had a great start. He's up to 14th. Alonso has dropped to 15th. Horrible start for him. Hulkenberg is 16th. Tsunoda 17th. And then Zhou 18th. Bottas 19th. And Sargent 20th as Sergio Perez is got a great run on Piastri down to turn 12. Piastri defends and has got DRS. Remember, in the sprint, you have DRS from lap 2 onwards as Perez goes off the track and lets, thankfully, Oscar back through. So let me just update that. Yeah, Carlos Sainz is on the soft compound tyre and everybody else is on the medium. As here is Russell right behind Perez. And Perez clearly faster in the Red Bull than Piastri is in the McLaren, which is not necessarily a surprise, as we're already on lap 3. Max Verstappen 1.2 seconds clear of Lewis Hamilton. As here is Russell right behind Perez. Is he going to send it? No, as Perez kind of thinks about sending it on Piastri at turn 1. And now Russell thinking about a move, possibly round the outside. No. But yeah, Piastri struggling in these first couple laps, as Lewis Hamilton's had a great first sector, and he's got the gap down to Verstappen to under a second, as they're about, or pretty much now, will be on the back straight. So Lewis Hamilton will have the DRS to assist him in keeping up at least with Verstappen. And yeah, Piastri has got quite a train behind him with Perez, Russell, Gasly, Albon, Ocon, Ricciardo, Stroll. As Perez tries again on Piastri and goes round the outside, but Piastri forces his way back up the inside. But surely Perez, with a better drive out, will get it done. And he just about does. He aggressively gets past. That's vital for his sprint. So Sergio Perez up to 6th. As now Russell trying to go around the outside of Piastri, and he does, and he takes the position, but I think he may have gone off the track to complete that. In fact, I think he did. So, be interested to see if the stewards tell Mercedes, or if race control tells Mercedes to let Piastri back through. But Russell on lap 4 is up to 7th place. And Gasly saying, even on the radio, Russell overtook off the track. And yeah, that looks pretty obvious from what I just saw of his onboard live. Here is a replay of the start. As usual, the inside line, a very good place to be. Verstappen came across. I would like to see from Leclerc's on board whether Max came across a bit too aggressively, but it looked okay from what I saw. And then because Leclerc he didn't really have the momentum on the inside in turn 1, Hamilton just sailed around the outside of him. And, Piastri made contact with Sainz. Sainz's right rear to Piastri's left front. So, maybe that's why Oscar is struggling for pace. Maybe he's got a slight bit of front wing damage. As Lewis Hamilton right on Max's tail. They're coming towards the end of lap 4, and Lewis is only 0.7 of a second behind. Mercedes genuinely have got the speed. And Leclerc, behind these two, has been well and truly dropped. Leclerc 3.3 seconds behind Hamilton. As we're on lap 5, 15 laps of the sprint remaining. Great omen for this sprint and also for tomorrow, this pace from Mercedes. And yeah, Piastri clearly has got damage because he's got a whole train of cars behind him. As Russell now tries to pull away. Gasly in the background, dive bombs Piastri. Does he get past? Yes, he does. Pierre Gasly is up to 8th place. And Piastri is, well, if he's not going to pick up his pace, which I don't think he can really do with that damage, whatever he's got, then I think McLaren might be best hitting him. Because now he's in 9th, he is not in the points. Brilliant move from Gasly, dive bombing up the inside, and I don't think Piastri... I think Piastri knows he hasn't really got anything to defend with because he is struggling with his pace. As Carlos Sainz really starting to struggle now on the soft compound tyre. Got Lando Norris right on his tail with DRS, and is Norris going to send it at turn 12? Not yet, but those soft compound tyres already wearing out quite heavily. As Max on the radio saying drivability is not for sure not there. I lost the rear completely. And Red Bull saying it could have been a gust of wind. But he is definitely not as quick as I expected in this sprint. As Norris really looks like he's going to pass Sainz in the next lap or two. As we are on lap 6, and Hamilton did not have a great end to lap 5, and Max is now about a second clear of Hamilton as they are on lap 6. And under investigation is Russell and Piastri at turn 15. Maybe Russell will get a penalty. If he does, though, I don't think necessarily it's going to hurt him, because I think he'll build enough of a gap, a 5-second gap, to to not lose any positions. As Lewis just saying on the radio there behind Verstappen that Max has gone off the track a few times. Of course, they have redefined the track limits, so maybe that is maybe confusing him. Why Max isn't getting maybe more warnings than he should. As Norris once again has DRS on Sainz, but is not close enough, I don't think. No, he's not, to go for a move. And this is what I was saying in the build-up. McLaren are probably going to be quicker in the sprint today than Ferrari, but Ferrari have a lot more top speed down that back straight, which is hurting McLaren's ability to overtake, as Albon has overtaken Oscar Piastri for 9th. As, George Russell has got a 5-second time penalty for overtaking off the track, it'll be. Leaving the track and gaining an advantage, as Fernando Alonso has overtaken Kevin Magnussen for 14th place on now lap 7 of 19. As Norris still really close behind. Perez is closing the gap behind as well. And here's a replay of Russell leaving the track and getting an advantage. And he simply just drove off to go round the outsiders. Mercedes saying, we think you got pushed off track first. And George then saying he got run out of road. He absolutely did not. He wasn't even alongside when they started accelerating out of the corner. That's complete bullshit. And deservedly have got a penalty, as that's a replay of Albon diving down the inside of Piastri at turn 12. As Piastri continues to fall down the field. But Okay sprint so far as Lewis Hamilton has now dropped 2 seconds behind as Norris tried to overtake Sainz at turn 12 and I think went a bit too wide, and Sainz has come back past and maintains just about 4th place, but Lando going to have to get it done the next time he tries because Sergio Perez is quickly catching and Russell will be probably as well as Hulkenberg passes Magnussen for 15th place. And we are on lap 8. And yeah, Max Verstappen now 2.3 seconds clear of Lewis Hamilton. So Hamilton's pace has really dropped off in the last couple laps. Maybe just pushed a little too hard. As here's a replay of Norris. Yeah, dive bombing at turn 12. Kept her on the track at least, but just went a little too deep. Thankfully didn't run into Sainz, who reclaimed the racing line into turn 13. And Sainz doing exactly what he needs to do if he's going to get a good result out of this sprint. He's already 5 seconds behind his teammate. It's not really a surprise because those soft compound tyres will be getting much worse lap by lap, as now Sergio Perez within a second of Norris and Russell catching quickly behind. So Carlos Sainz is going to have a train behind him soon, as Norris this time around not close enough to go for a move on Sainz. But yeah, things are settling down, and really the main battle is for 4th, 5th and 6th place between Sainz, Norris and Perez. Because Verstappen has for now checked out front, and Leclerc is very comfortable in 3rd. He's not able to catch Hamilton, and he's pulling away very quickly from his teammate behind, who's on a different tyre compound. So the top 3 look like they're all settled, really. As Kevin Magnussen and Yuki Tsunoda are very close to each other down the field. I think Tsunoda did briefly overtake Magnussen, and they are still very close. I think they are side by side. We're not seeing it though, unfortunately. Here's a replay. Here we go. There's a replay of what happened at turn 15, and Tsunoda went up the inside. Magnussen went off and presumably kept the position. And they're still side by side on the exit turn 1 going in through turn 2. And Magnussen keeps the position. I'm not sure if Magnussen was forced off or not. I need to see another replay, really, of what happened there. But Kevin Magnussen clearly struggling, as he's got the rest of the field behind him, of Tsunoda, Zhou, Bottas and Sargent, as Norris getting close into turn 12 on Sainz, but not close enough if he's going to overtake. And Sergio Perez has actually dropped back by a couple tenths of a second, as Lance Stroll has overtaken Daniel Ricciardo. So Stroll is up to 12th as we're on lap 10 of 19. 10 full laps remaining of this sprint. As I think Kevin Magnussen now under investigation for leaving the track and gaining an advantage, as yeah, the main fight to look at is Sainz, Norris and Perez. Russell is actually going slower than Carlos Sainz. Russell's pace very poor, and he's actually matching, if not going slower, than Pierre Gasly in the Alpine, who is behind him. So Russell is very slow. We've had 10 laps, and he's already He's already 11, 12 seconds behind his teammate, so he's losing at least a second a lap. to his teammate as Norris a lot closer now. And Carlos Sainz is not even going to defend. Norris up to 4th. Can he keep it? Yes, he does. So Lando Norris is up to 4th place. And this is where Carlos Sainz's afternoon starts to get very tricky. As Sergio Perez is right behind him. And I expect Norris will very quickly disappear into the distance on lap 11. And Leclerc is 6.8 seconds ahead of him. So it's not over in terms of finishing on the podium in this sprint. But realistically, it's too much now to do for Lando to finish on the podium. And you would imagine by the end of this first sector, Lando will pull over a second ahead. As Kevin Magnussen he was in 16th. He is now 17th. And already 2.5 seconds behind Tsunoda. So Magnussen really struggling. Got to say, Aston Martin are not very quick. Because even though Stroll was past Ricciardo's still within a second of Stroll. So, and not really able to catch Alpine. Alpine a lot quicker on pace than Aston Martin. As here comes Perez. And Sainz once again not defending. And Sergio Perez is up to 5th place. So let me just update that quick. With the tyre compounds as well. Carlos Sainz, though, might be able to hang on to 6th because Russell, he is catching now, Russell, but before he wasn't going very quickly. So, yeah, he might be able to hang on for 6th. We will see. As Zhou Guanyu passes Kevin Magnussen for 17th. An epic battle. And now on lap 12 as turn 1 incident involving Albon and Piastri. No further action when it comes to leaving the track and gaining an advantage. I didn't quite see what happened there, but yeah. Oscar Piastri, at least his pace has settled down and he is now doing better lap times, but he is still a lot slower than his teammate. But he is, I think, keeping up, if not catching now, Alex Albon. So he might get back past Albon before the end. As here's a replay of Zhou undercutting Magnussen on the exit of turn 15. And does he send it around the outside? Not quite. And Magnussen is actually back ahead, so he must have got back ahead at turn 12. Magnussen in 17th as Max Verstappen, 3.8 seconds, now 4 seconds clear. And Red Bull showing their clear superiority. Which is formidable for now. And also for tomorrow, despite them only starting 6th at best with Verstappen. As Hamilton lagging further and further behind as Tsunoda is now up to 15th place. Just past Nico Hülkenberg on now lap 13 we are. Lando Norris is catching Leclerc, but not quick sorry. Not quick enough to catch him before the end of the sprint. So Leclerc is going to finish in 3rd if he keeps this level of lap time up. As now, George Russell right on Carlos Sainz's tail, and looks like Russell is going to overtake Sainz probably on this lap. Carlos's pace falling off a cliff, and he might even fall into the clutches of Pierre Gasly, who's only 2.2 seconds behind Russell. We've still got a few laps to go yet. as Russell has a very bad exit from turn 11. And not sure he's actually going to have the chance to overtake Sainz into turn 12. He's not. Too far behind. Very poor exit, and he didn't really gain any time down the straight. So he'll have to wait. And the longer he takes to get past, Gasly will catch up and surely himself have a go. Gasly's having a very good sprint here. And at the minute, is heading for at least 1 point. Gasly, remember, is, I believe, 1 point behind Stroll in the Drivers' Championship. So Gasly will, I think, if he keeps this position up to the end, I think he will go into the top 10 of the championship. I'll just quickly confirm. I'll just quickly confirm if that is indeed true. And yes, that is true. So if Pierre Gasly holds on for 8th place, he will go into the top 10 of the Drivers' Championship ahead of Lance Stroll. As Daniel Ricciardo very close behind Stroll. Ricciardo has got back ahead of the Canadian as Magnussen and Zhou under investigation for forcing another driver off the track. All going off down the field. As Zhou is now up to 17th place. But yeah, Ricciardo up to 12th. And Aston Martin not quick at all. As Max Verstappen out front, 4.5 seconds clear of Lewis Hamilton, as Russell still has DRS on Sainz, but he's nowhere near close enough to think about overtaking, as Pierre Gasly catching very quickly and is only 1.2 seconds behind Russell, as Alonso has just passed Lance Stroll, probably on the back straight. So Alonso is up to 13th on lap 15. And here's a replay of Ricciardo passing Stroll and just going right around the outside at turn 1. Brilliant move from Ricciardo, who's having actually a pretty decent sprint, as that is Zhou trying to overtake Magnussen at turn 15 and doing it, but it wasn't that clean. Or was it Valtteri Bottas? I think it might have been Valtteri Bottas actually instead, because he is now past Kevin Magnussen. So the battle continues between Sainz and Russell for 6th place. And Gasly has dropped back actually on this lap by about half a second. And Russell's still not really that close. He's just not getting a good enough exit. He looks closer on this occasion than he did before, but not the Mercedes is not really gaining that much down the straight. No, nowhere near. And Sainz comfortably holds on. And if Carlos can keep up this lap time he's doing, then I think Carlos Sainz will hang on for 6th place, which is a pretty good result considering where he started and the tyre he started on as well. As Max Verstappen now starts lap 16 and he's 5.5 seconds clear of Hamilton. So clearly Red Bull have a much better pace than everybody else. As Russell gets a better exit from the final corner and he's a lot closer on the run up to turn 1. Will he send it? I think he's too far behind, and he is. Of course, remember, these two collided at this very corner, turn 1. At the first corner of the race last year. And Gasly actually dropping back, so I think his tyres may be suffering. As looking at the positions, I think all the other positions are really settled. I think this Sainz and Russell fight is the only fight really remaining for the rest of the sprint, because everyone is pretty stretched apart. There is a fight between Magnussen and Sargent for 19th place, but I mean, who cares about that, really? And Russell still, nowhere near the back of Sainz into turn 12. Russell's pace, very, very poor. Lewis Hamilton is, 17? I think 17, 18 seconds clear is Hamilton of Russell. So, very poor performance by the man they do call Mr. Saturday. That's Max Verstappen. Will be wanting that nickname, as he's absolutely crushing the competition on this Saturday. And he's just began lap 17. He's now 6.5 seconds clear, and he's just stretching his legs, really, just demonstrating his clear dominance. And, Yuki Tsunoda has just overtaken Lance Stroll for 14th place. Oh, Stroll's got a problem. Yeah, Stroll's just said on the radio, I need to box, no brakes. So Lance Stroll, and he pits now. I think Lance Stroll is out of the sprint race, so still they're struggling with those brakes, which is not good to hear at all. Going into tomorrow, so he's down to 20th, and I'll just put now that he is DNF. And just the position there of the text. But yeah, he is out of this race. Actually, let me see if I can put retired instead of DNF, whether it'll fit there. No, not quite. So let me, oh no, I'll have to play around with the font size a moment. As we are on lap 18, Russell is still behind Sainz, so don't worry, you're not missing anything. But yeah, let me just quickly play around with the font size quickly so I can, what do you call it? Try and display on screen that Stroll is at is out. Oh, I think I'll just put DNF. Just leave it at that. And readjust it. There you go. Yes, Stroll out of the sprint, which is, of course, sad. Russell still within a second of Sainz, but still not close enough at all to try and overtake. As one battle to look out for, actually, down the field, is Ocon and Ricciardo. Ricciardo's having a very good end to the sprint here. He's only 0.7 of a second behind Ocon as they're on the back straight now. So Ricciardo might be able to pinch 11th place. As we are now on the final lap of this absolute waste of time. As Max Verstappen out front, 8 seconds clear, and he has absolutely dominated this sprint race. As Russell now on his final lap, and he has one final chance if he's going to finish in 6th. But Mercedes are heading for 9 points in this sprint. Ferrari are heading for how many? 9 points as well, I think. So not exactly going to matter to Mercedes at the end of the day if Russell doesn't get past. McLaren only heading for, as Zhou Guan Yu has been given a 5-second time penalty, presumably for leaving the track and gaining an advantage. Lando Norris, he's only going to be scoring 5 points for McLaren, which is not great, but they are 5 points closer to overtaking Aston Martin in the championship, which surely they'll have that done by this time tomorrow. As Max Verstappen, who has won many races, not just this year, but in the past couple years, comes into the final 2 corners now to win the sprint in Texas. Here comes the final corner, and Max Verstappen takes victory by a country mile. Lewis Hamilton will finish in second, and Hamilton will finish 9.5 seconds behind. We all know clearly the favourite for tomorrow, even though he's starting in 6th, it is Max Verstappen. As Leclerc just about hangs on to 3rd. Norris was close in the end, but finishes 4th, and then it will be Perez in 5th. Carlos Sainz finishes 6th, with George Russell 7th, and then Gasly 8th. And oh no, Russell, he's got a 5-second penalty. So Russell has dropped down to 8th. So Pierre Gasly finishes in 7th. Great result for him. Russell finishes 8th. With Albon 9th. What a result for him. Great drive today. Piastri 10th. Ocon 11th. Ricciardo 12th. Alonso 13th. Tsunoda 14th. Hulkenberg 15th. Bottas 16th. Zhou 17th. Let me just quickly do that. Yeah, Bottas 16th. Zhou 17th. Magnussen will be 18th. Logan Sargent 19th. And Lance Stroll, your only retirement of the sprint in Austin. So there you go, guys. A sprint happened, but that's all we can say about this absolute shit show for format. But I will quickly ask, at this late hour, who is your driver of the day for the sprint? So hold on, let me just quickly set that up. Who is your driver of the day for the F1 sprint in Texas? And your options for the sprint driver of the day will be Max Verstappen. I'll throw Carlos Sainz in there because he had a good first lap. Pierre Gasly, I guess. Who else? I'll put Alex Albon in there. For me, it's clearly Max Verstappen, but let me know. Who is your driver of the day for the sprint? And also let me know what you thought of the sprint itself. Was it good? Was it shit? As far as I'm concerned, it was shit, and I definitely regret doing a watch along. I know you guys obviously look, the more I stream, the more you guys love it, which is great, but yeah, this was a waste of time, really. As Verstappen climbs out of his car, and that'll be another 8 points for his total. Of course, doesn't need any more points because he's already the champion. But yeah, with him starting in 6th tomorrow, I think he's going to win tomorrow. Even though I've not decided on my full prediction for tomorrow's race, I've definitely decided who, in my mind, is going to win tomorrow. It is Max Verstappen. Even starting in 6th, I think he'll still win. It will be as inevitable as the Belgian Grand Prix earlier this year, where he started a bit lower down and still ended up winning by, I think, was it 25 seconds or something in the end. So yeah, let's get a quick initial reaction from you guys. I'm not going to stick around for that long because it is late. Plus, yeah, nothing really great happened here. Willifon Gaming says just get rid of sprint races. I could if I would. Sorry, no, I could if I would. I would if I could. That's what I meant. Sudan C says boring. What was Max's gap in the end? It was 9.5 seconds to Hamilton. Crystal Racing says sprints have no jeopardy either because mostly no one wants to crash and make their mechanics fix their cars. Yeah, true. I think there are some drivers out there that maybe could have pushed harder, but I mean, what's the point? Especially if you're like down in 11th, 12th place, you know you're not going to score a point. What's the point, absolutely going for it at the end of the day? McLaren F1 Racing, what a Max snooze fest. Let me see if I can find some more comments here. Student C says, not all sprints are bad, but this one boring. True, not all sprint races, in history have been bad, but yeah, this one was just boring. Forgetful. Vinster says, surprised to see the stream active today. Thanks, Chazza and crew. See you all tomorrow. Time to tend to the missus for me. Cheers. No problem. Crystal Racing says, I prefer practice simply because I'm not compelled to watch it all. Or, well, even with practice, you're not even compelled to watch it at all. Because the thing is, and I still maintain this, that's not all sprint races, but some of the sprint races are not any more exciting than practice sessions, especially this one or the one we had in Baku earlier this year. There was, I think, one last year or in 2021, which was just a complete waste of time. The more they happen, the more clear it becomes that they're shit. All of the drivers agree that they're shit, but they're too scared to say that because they don't want to upset Liberty Media and say they're absolutely shit. The only person out there that probably will say that at the minute is Max Verstappen, who has said many, many times that sprint races are just not fun and are basically just a waste of time. And it's, at the end of the day, as I've said before, the sprint races, the only reason they exist is because Liberty Media, what they're trying to do is a constant chase for short-term entertainment. They cannot accept, Liberty Media, that you will have boring either races or weekends, which is why we have sprint races, because they have to try and entertain somehow. Which, when sport becomes way too much about, has it been entertaining enough, that's where it stops becoming a sport. Yes, sport, to a degree, has to be entertaining for people to want to watch, but it is not like a TV show or a film where it has to, it has to be good for anyone to want to watch it. At the end of the day, these particular sports, like motorsport, Formula One, other sports like football, basketball, whatever other sport, American football, whatever you want to call it, the reason they got popular is because they were naturally exciting and entertaining. Not because they, did everything and fucked around with the format as much as they could to make things entertaining on purpose, or as entertaining as possible. It was just naturally exciting to watch. And Liberty Media have gone away from that. They're trying to turn Formula One more into a TV show. They're trying to make Formula One less serious and more just pandering to, quick viewership rather than long-term viewership. And that's why we've got sprint races, and that's why Formula One at the minute is not very exciting. But I think, given how late it is, I think I'm just going to bring the stream to a close, guys. Let me finish up the poll in the chat. There's been 30 votes in total. And I asked you guys, who is the driver, who is your driver of the day for the F1 sprint in Texas? 30 votes in total. You guys voted for Max Verstappen. No surprise about that. Quick update. This is the next 2 pieces of content on the channel. Make sure to join me tomorrow evening for the 2023 United States Grand Prix race watch-along. I'll be live at 6 p.m. UK time. That's 2 hours before the race starts. We'll be doing the race preview, then the watch-along, and then a reaction afterwards. I believe I am going to be joined by my co-commentator Niblo, but that's not a guarantee, so we'll see tomorrow. Also, with my new PC that I'm streaming on this weekend, there may be a couple issues with, having him on. I'm hoping there won't, and it'll go normally, but yeah, I'm just trying to prepare you guys for the possibility that, because I'm on a new PC, maybe there'll be a couple little teething issues. But yeah, make sure to join me for that tomorrow. And then, of course, after that, I'll be then live on Thursday at 8 p.m. UK time for the weekend preview for the Mexico City Grand Prix. But that's it for Sprint Day, guys. Thank you for coming along. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like this, because we do qualifying and race watch-alongs for every Grand Prix. Make sure as well to smash the like button before you go. Let's try and get up to 50 likes if we can before the end of the stream. And also, if you want to keep up to date with the content on the channel, make sure to follow me on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. It's ChazzaHD on Twitter or at ChazHD5. And there's also a link below or even in the chat to my Discord server. Great place that is to keep up to date with content and also, channel updates at certain parts of the year. So thank you guys for coming along. And until tomorrow, the main event, which we hope is a lot better, the 2023 United States Grand Prix race day and my race watch along at 6 p.m. UK time. It has been me, ChazzaHD. Goodbye.